checking to make sure it is you and not some other muse. Because you never know in this day and age when someone else's muse will sneak up behind you, tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, it's me, your muse." How do you know if it is or it is not? You look them right in the eye and you can tell. You should be able to see your own reflection in their irises. And I just saw mine. So you are my muse. Here we are again. Awesome. So lately, Muse, I have been on the Book of Face doing live readings from my books because of, well, the situation we are currently in, which is a pandemic and a lot of people are stuck at home. So I thought, I'll just, on a whim, I'll just read some selections from my books live in front of people. And we'll see how it goes. And people have enjoyed it. It's been a nice respite from the crisis. And I have to say, Muse, it's been not just a lot of fun for me, but it's also been a learning experience. And what have I learned from this? Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say that it is something that I highly recommend that every author does. That you stand in front of a camera or sit in front of a camera or whatever you need to do in front of a camera and read your books aloud to an audience, even if it is a virtual audience. Why? There's a few reasons for that. The obvious reason is that you kind of are put in a position of performing your books. And when you have to do that, you start to learn some of the nuances about your own writing. And it can be challenging, especially when you do what I did and you go back, way back in time, and read some of your early works. But I'll get to that in a moment. One of the things that I always recommend to new and young writers is that you do read them aloud, be it in front of an audience or just by yourself, because you get to hear the cadence of your narration and your dialogue. And cadence is very important because cadence can set a mood. Cadence is also very, very much a part of your writer's voice. And when you read that book aloud, you can read it to yourself, read it in your mind, and you're not going to necessarily hear the cadence. Yes, you'll hear the words, you'll hear the meaning, you'll get it all, but you don't hear the cadence. And when things are spoken aloud, it's just like Shakespeare. Shakespeare was meant to be spoken aloud, not just read. Because when you speak it aloud, all of a sudden the meaning becomes oh so clear. And when you're just reading it, some people have a lot of trouble getting the meaning of Shakespeare. So when you start reading your own work aloud, you're going to hear things that you don't hear in your head. So if you can't find an audience for you to read them to, then read them into a recorder. Now, I know. The first thing out of your head, your mouth, your face is this: I can't stand the sound of my voice. Well, get over it. You just really need to get over that. And the reasons why you can't stand to hear the sound of your voice is because everybody sounds different out loud than they do. Everybody sounds different to other people than they do, because when you speak, you're hearing your voice inside of your head with all of those internal resonators. So you'll sound bigger and deeper and richer in your head than you do to the public. So just get over that and record yourself reading your books aloud, and just keep doing it until you get over the idea of how you sound aloud. Now, if you absolutely cannot get past that hurdle, then find someone to read your books to you. because you need to hear them out loud. Not only is reading out loud a great way to proofread your books, hint, hint, it is also, like I said, it is the definitive way to hear the cadence of your narration. And that's just as important as the dialogue. Because truth be told, the writer's voice is found in the narration. Because generally speaking, in the dialogue, you're speaking with another character's voice. So you really need to fine-tune your narration. And one great way to do that is to read it out loud. Now that I've beaten that horse, let's talk about something else. One of the things that I have discovered, I was, during one of the readings, I was asked by an audience member if there was one of my books that if I can, if there was one of my books that I would like to go back and rewrite. And instantly I said no. And I've talked about it with you, Muse. Until I'm blue in the face, that one of the main reasons why I don't want to ever go back and rewrite my books is because they were written at a very specific time. And I was a specific person at that time. And I change, and I have changed over the years. Things are more important to me now that weren't as important to me then. And even as a writer, things are more important to me now. And you can see it. If you were to read my very first book, A Blade Away, and then right after that, read Hopetown or Fear, you will see immediately some of the things that have become important to me and some of the things that are no longer important to me. For example, and this was internally, as I was reading these older books aloud, I was cringing. Because one of the things that has become very important to me over the years is to avoid repetitive words. So I try very hard to not, and this is especially true for important words or just words that stand out. I try very hard not to repeat those within neighboring paragraphs, especially neighboring sentences. Now, there are certain words that you can't avoid, I, and, things like that. But if you say, so let's just say, for example, that you use the word apoplectic in a sentence, and then a paragraph down, you use the same word. Well, as a reader reads that, they're going to remember that, and they're going to think, why couldn't they come up with a different word than apoplectic? Unless it is germane to the narration. If you're, like, for example, if you're referring back to the fact that someone was apoplectic, that's a different story. But if you're just being lazy and using the same word twice, you need to rethink that. And back in my earlier works, it wasn't as important back then. Even reading I, Zombie I, which was very, very, which was the first book that I published that I became very aware of the editorial process. And I became actually active in the editorial process. So even in that book, as I was reading the first couple of chapters to a live audience, virtually live audience, I found myself going, oh, ah, and not in the good way, might I add. So honestly, to answer that question to that reader, if I could go back and do something to those books, the only thing that I would really do is give them a little bit more polish. And by polish, I mean polish them with the frame of mind and the skills that I have now. Not as in rewrite them. Just like I would go back and I would look for repetitive words. I would look for things like that have become crucial to my style and my voice today. Otherwise, I wouldn't touch them. But still, now, it wasn't all bad. And that's not really bad. It's to me, it's, it's notable to me because for example, I wrote, see, I've just used for example 3 times in this last 10 or so minutes. As an example, um, I wrote iZombie I 10 years ago. 10 years ago. That's crazy talk. And I think, now I know that I wrote A Blade Away in 1999, but it wasn't published. It was published quite a bit later. I think it was published in 2008, maybe. So those were, that was a long time ago. And I have written a lot of books since then. And one of my modus operandi as a writer is that the book that I publish now has to be better than the book that I previously published. By doing that, I know that I'm always growing as an author, and my books are getting better every time. Because, we want to strive for perfection. That doesn't mean we're going to ever reach perfection, but we always want to be striving for it. And one way that we can, at least as artists, that we can track that growth is to go back and reread those earlier works. It was one of the very interesting things that I discovered in rereading some of these earlier works was I saw the seeds of my writer's voice. I saw me plant the seeds in A Blade Away, and as I started reading later books, I saw those seeds germinating and growing. And now I can go back and I can read these books that I've recently published and see that just to continue on with that metaphor, I can see that the flowers have started to bloom from that germination. And it's fulfilling. Yes, for some it's an exercise in torture. But you need to get beyond that, because you need to be able to go back to those early works and read them with an eye on where you were and where you are. And if you ever find yourself suffering from imposter syndrome, I almost didn't even want to say those 2 words, because we all, past and present tense and future tense, we all suffer from that. But if you want to at least alleviate some of that pain that you suffer from imposter syndrome, read your early works. And you'll see, okay, and this is something that dawned on me, that I had no idea what I was doing when I wrote Blade Away. No idea. I just knew that I had a story to tell and I wanted to tell it. So when I go back and I reread that story now, I can go, I may not have known what I was doing, but I can look back at this and still be proud of what I did. Because even without training, even without ever having studied the written word from the perspective of being a writer, I can still look back on those early works and go, yes, I am a writer. I was a writer back then. From the artistry that I have inside of my soul, a writer was born. And it was organic. It happened naturally. It wasn't forced. It just was there, and I let it speak. And that alone is worth going back and reading your early works. But all of the other bits of education and enlightenment that you will find along the way as you reread those early works, it's all worth it, and it's all good. And especially right now, when we are all kind of stuck at home and some people are desperate for things to do to pass the time, go back and read your early works. Trust me. Trust me. It will be an exercise that you will be very glad you undertook. I am. I've been very thrilled about going back, not only because I'm helping people who are struggling through this crisis, I'm helping them, but I'm helping myself too. That sounded kind of selfish because that's not the reason why I'm doing this. The reason why I'm doing this truly is to help other people. It's not about me. It's just not. It's my way to give back a little bit, I guess. But anyway, Muse, that's what I had to say today. I hope that you learned something from me for a change. Okay? Anyway, thank you, Muse, for hanging out and listening. Thank you for hanging out and listening to me blather on. And I look forward to our chats next time. Thank you, Muse, and have a great day. I forgot to say it. I forgot to tell you that you are awesome, Muse. I don't even deserve this thumb. But you do. Because you, Muse, are awesome. Left-handed, yeah.